The Center for Procurement Excellence is a nonprofit member organization with a mission of educating, promoting, and advocating for better RFP processes. Join CPE today and make your RFPs faster and more transparent. Membership also includes discounts to all of our training and networking events. CPE hosts a variety of virtual and in-person networking and training events throughout the year. Visit our website to get signed up. CPE Speakers Bureau is available for your regional and national meetings and professional conferences. Contact us to learn more.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
All right, well, I appreciate the invite today. Really enjoy any opportunity to share our story. So I will start out by telling you a little bit about Lawrence. So I lead a team of engineers in delivering public projects for the city of Lawrence. Our city is located between Kansas City and Topeka. We have a population around 100,000. We have two universities, the University of Kansas as well as Haskell University. And our group, our engineering and construction management team, is within municipal services and operations. So it's a merged department, public works and utilities, but we manage all of the city's CIP. We just adopted our 5-year CIP earlier this month, and it's currently at $529 million over that 5-year period. So as I mentioned, our team of engineers with the city, we have objectives for our project delivery, and those align with the city's. And many of you probably have similar objectives: transparency and accountability. We want to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. We'd like to leverage vendors that have expertise, engage with them, and deliver successful project outcomes for the city. So on-time projects, on-budget projects. So a little bit of history. As Brian mentioned, the city historically has used a design, bid, build process, picking the lowest responsible bidder. There are very few exceptions. We had a couple projects, wastewater projects, in the mid-2000s that did utilize a design build approach. They were driven by schedule because of development. And then our Lawrence Library renovation in 2014 was also design build. But with that exception, hundreds of our other projects have always been low bid. So our goal, of course, has been to provide best value, focus on expertise and collaboration of the team. We know we have a better project if we have a good team from the beginning, but we were challenged by the community's perception of alternative delivery. So I'll take you back to before our alternative policy was developed. I was project manager, newly assigned to our new police headquarters project. And prior to coming to the city, I had had some consulting experience where I had had some alternative delivery experience, and our city manager had come to the city in 2016. He had some experience with alternative delivery. So when we were faced with this project, we saw many reasons to propose an alternative delivery. As soon as we started to approach our governing body about that, it hit the papers and we heard from the public what they thought. So one of the first articles that came out in December of 2017 is an article saying, we're planning to build these new headquarters, a $17 million project, and it's going to be a no bid process. So public comments included no bid. Remember what happened with Rock Chalk Park. That was a developer project, but it was in the news and had received a lot of feedback from the public. And then comments that ended with "let's get smart," referring to us not really thinking this through. Why put the taxpayers' money at risk? So we went ahead mid-December of 2017, and we did ask the City Commission to consider alternatives to traditional bidding, and we mentioned alternative delivery, design build, construction manager at risk. We continued to get more comments, including here, I fail to understand why there should ever be a process other than sealed bid. Also, a sealed bid process is the only way to ensure all parties are treated equitably and fairly. So this is just a small snippet of all the comments we received.
Melinda, I just was going to chime in and just say how interesting that,
And
you know,
then
a lot
my
of
little
times you
button
hear,
over here.
oh, hang on one moment there. A lot of times we hear, low bid treated with derision and kind of laughter, like, oh, that can't be the best approach. But now all of a sudden it's the most equal, it's the most fair, was some of the comments coming in.
Right. So now that's a little background on what led up to the policy change. And our goal was to become a client of choice. That was top of mind. So what does it mean to be a client of choice? To be a client of choice means that, contractors, engineers, designers would want to work with you over other owners. And that was huge for us. We wanted to encourage more and more interest in our projects. Clients of choice get the best teams for any of our vendors. We get the experts. If you're a client of choice, our firms putting together responses to RFPs, they're going to put together a more accurate proposal, spend the time on it to get to know us and really dive into what would be best for our projects here in Lawrence. And then clients of choice personnel know how to, collaborate with experts, and we're more attractive to the AEC industry. So being a client of choice means successful projects to us, and words that come to mind, on-time projects, under budget, innovation, collaboration, trust. These were all things that were very important to us. So diving into the details of our policy change. So as mentioned previously, the city had used just a couple alternative delivery methods in the past on just a couple projects, but it was all treated as a special case. And we really didn't explicitly have authorization to do that. And involving our city attorney's office, they said we need to be more transparent with this and update our charter ordinance to allow it. So they wanted to make sure we had all the guidelines in place to ensure consistency and that we could utilize these best practices. So state law has a piece of it that, basically says here, in cities of the first class, public improvements that exceed $2,000 have to have an engineer's estimate submitted to the governing body and sealed bids for the work. Of course, that 2000 was based on this being written in 1903. So we had updated it since. We had updated it to 15,000, and then, more recently it went to 50,000. So, but still any project over 50,000 had to go through the formal RFP process and be awarded to low bid. And so this is what we wanted to look at changing. So that required our charter ordinance to be updated to allow that. A charter ordinance update required a vote 2/3 of our governing body. We have 5 commissioners. So we did have to get 4 of the 5 to vote in favor of this change. And it had a notification period in the newspaper. So it would not be effective for 60 days. So the piece that we changed, it's kind of a minor piece within the whole charter ordinance in terms of the amount of words, but it made a big impact. So we added this section here that the governing body may authorize the city manager to undertake the construction or reconstruction of a public improvement project through alternative delivery method upon a finding of the governing body that the alternative project delivery method is in the public interest. And then after we went to them with that proposed language, we added this final sentence based on some of their comments that the city manager may adopt procedures for selecting the alternative delivery method and for the conduct of the alternative delivery process. The commission was not comfortable making this change without ensuring we would have a very specific process outlined. These guidelines would be in place and followed by all. So again, moving to this did require the charter ordinance to be updated. They approved the charter ordinance to allow it, but with that caveat that the procedures be created and approved. So creating the procedures, I will say before going into the details of the procedures, one of the challenges with this is that our project, that police facility headquarters project, was now on hold. So we went to the commission in December, and it was now, January of 2018, and we're ready to get moving on this project, start design, and we're paused until we can work through these procedures. So we gave ourselves about 4 months to do the work, knowing that 60 days of that was the charter ordinance going through the public notification process. But we had 4 months total to go back to the commission, get approval after having drafted these procedures. So things that were included in the procedures, these were developed and approved by the governing body and had to be done before the charter ordinance in order to prevent the delays. So we were shooting for the very beginning of May. We utilized research by the Center of Procurement Excellence, and we did work with Dr. Lines with Simplar to incorporate elements that were consistent with research and aspects of the expertise-driven project delivery system. So the purpose of these procedures was really to be able to go to our governing body with what is the best delivery method for a particular project, to then have guidelines for how we would evaluate our vendors for an alternative delivery team, and then promote that accountability and transparency. So some of the factors that we listed in the procedures for things the commission could consider as staff came forward with a recommendation. I just have a few here, but things like if a project has a lot of phases, if it's a renovation type project, if there's going to need to be operations happening at the same time, if there's budget constraints, schedule constraints, if because of public perception, it helps us to actually do alternative delivery. We just wanted to put it out there that as we would get further along, as we would have successful projects, the public may actually ask us to do future projects as alternative delivery. So we were optimistic from the beginning on all of that. And then also our internal resources to deliver on a particular type of delivery method. So just, this is kind of a handful of things that we could approach the commission with as reasons why. And then in the selection process section of our procedures, we talked about the selection committee needed to be trained because we're going to go about selection a little bit differently than how we had reviewed RFPs in the past. We were going to ensure that all proposals were reviewed independently. We didn't want that group thought coming into scoring proposals. We didn't want conflicts of interest, so made sure that was clearly stated that there could be no conflicts of interest in those selected to be part of an evaluation team. We did mention that RFQs could be used, and then the RFPs, they needed to be competitive and have very clear scoring, and that interviews might be part of that process as well. So in the competitive RFP, we want clear instructions, schedule of dates. I would like to say all RFPs that go out will have these things we list, but we were not consistent. So we were lacking in this area even, prior to this. So we wanted to make it very clear what deliverables we would be asking for the vendors working on our projects, what the timelines were, what our goals and objectives were that helps our vendors to put together better proposals. The criteria, this was the part where we missed the mark many times. We would not clearly communicate how we were going to evaluate the proposals and weight them. So we wanted to be much more transparent about that. We also stressed that any cost or fees or financial information would be in a sealed, envelope, or in the terms of virtually, a virtual submission, electronic submission. All of that would be evaluated separately. That would not be provided, so there's no bias in the scoring of the other sections of the RFP. And then no single section of criteria would exceed 35%. So as we have a breakdown, we need to make sure we're evaluating on enough things that no one section's more than 35% of the weight. I wasn't sure if Brian wanted to chime in on this slide and share anything in additional
Sure.
to how the Center for Procurement Excellence helped us with this.
I think that if you were to go back a slide, Melinda, it would just be a big woohoo for a lot of these things are some of the core recommendations that the Center for Procurement Excellence supports. So many of you have been through some of the RFP training classes that we do, and we talk about, scope of work and clarity of deliverables and publishing the criteria and not overly weighting fees and doing that separately and not having any criteria over 35%. So all of these things are consistent with the recommendations that we here at CPE like to provide. And then I know, spoiler alert for me is I know where this is headed in your first projects, Melinda, with especially that last bullet point of no more than 35%, having that written down, documented, and approved formally before proceeding into the next steps of procuring your first project under these procedures became a handy thing to have in there. We'll say that.
Yes, definitely agree. So then on the project management section of our procedures, we wanted to outline, the project manager's qualifications, that they're familiar with the alternative delivery method proposed, that, in terms of the scope management, what contract terms, quality control, scope changes, how is all that being handled? As well as on the cost management side, one thing Commission did ask us to add in to the procedures themselves, and that is that all of our contracts have to write in that it's open book. If the city requests open book for, what their costs are on a project, that all of that is transparent to the city and then in turn to the public if any of that is questioned. And then on the communication side, we had concurrent to this been starting to do implementation of project management software for our capital projects. So we emphasize that a system like that would be utilized to track everything, and from documents to the cost to schedule all of that within the project management system. And that at the end of our projects, we would have reviews of the vendor's performance. So now on to my favorite topic, which is the projects and implementation of the policy. So as Brian mentioned, historically, we had been using the traditional design bid build for ages and ages. So we had started the very end of 2017 and into early 2018 utilizing XPD procurement for a couple different projects, including the software for our project management. We're looking at it for an environmental remediation project, and then the police headquarters project. So the police headquarters was the first project that was going to utilize these new procedures, and the first alternative delivery project that would test everything out and then be following, all of the guidelines. So this project was a $17 million construction project. It had $1.5 million for design, and that was it. So $18.5 million. It had, general obligation debt as the funding source. There was no additional money to allocate to this project. We went to the governing body in May of 2018 and asked to utilize the construction manager at risk and proceed with getting our design team and then our construction manager on board using the procedures. And then we also contracted with Simplar to assist with our expertise-driven procurement, because this would be the first time that we're doing it on a specific design and then construction, CMAR project. So we wanted some help through that process. So construction manager at risk, or CMAR for short, the things that appealed to us on the police facility project, and the reason we recommended that was primarily because we had that limited budget with no option to exceed. We also liked how they're involved from early on, with constructability reviews. If we're, over budget, they're putting the cost together, but they can value engineer things or make other recommendations. And there's really just risk management because they're able to assist us from that 30% design all the way through construction. So much smoother between the phases of the project. It also helped to speed things up a little bit and catch up from our 4 or 5 month delay. So we did utilize the XPD approach for this project to select both the design firm and the construction firm. So we went all in, utilized anonymous proposals, focused on mitigating risk. As I mentioned, it did reduce schedule. So here highlights some of the things that make this approach different. We really wanted to go after technical expertise, have high performing team, and pinpoint specific capabilities. With it being a police facility project, we want to make sure they had completed police facility projects in the past and understand some of the nuances in the design when you're designing a public safety building. And then immediately looking at how we could do some value engineering, because even though we had 18.5 million, we had previously estimated the things that were on the wish list were closer to 30 million. So we had okay, this is the have to have list, and then these are all the things we'll try to fit in if we can. So it was all about efficiency in the design and getting feedback from our contractor through design on different material options and things like that. So we knew what we were looking for. We'll go into the specifics more on XPD and how we evaluate these proposals. So again, these were blind and anonymous. So we made sure that the written proposals, information was redacted. So there was no identifying information. There could be no names. They couldn't mention past projects that they had worked on specifically by name, or team members' names, because we all know how to Google, so we could track stuff down. So none of that, no logos, pictures, and just basic formatting on the proposals. We like the approach of, an execution section or a project approach section that's only 2 pages. Sometimes we'll throw in a 3rd page and allow, them to write out maybe a Gantt chart or something on that 3rd page, but then risk, minimal pages on that and a couple pages for value or differentiation. So that was a complete different approach than our typical 1-inch thick paper proposals that we were used to up until 2018, really, when we adopted these procedures. So and this is actually a photo that Brian always shares, so I'd love to throw it in here. It is about the people. So that was what was so key about this, and getting that that team of experts, because they're the brain power behind your whole project on how they go about things. And we we value safety, so I'll mention that also. Any of those that mention safety in their approach and their execution within their proposal responses, it was huge. But you can see that there's different ways to go about a project. Some are definitely better than others. So when it came to interviews, this was completely different, and loved this approach. So what we did is we selected the key 3 or 4 team members from our vendor that we would interview like a job interview, because that's what it is, one-on-one. And each one would get 20-30 minutes. So if we picked 4, then we would set aside 2 hours for that team. It was more question and answer, and not, they don't come in with a PowerPoint as a team with the business development group and show us pretty pictures and how they've done this for other people before, so they can of course deliver a great project for us. It was very focused on those same key things within the proposal itself. So how are you going to go about this? What is your approach to our project? What differentiates you? And then what risks do you see with our project, and how will you mitigate those? So when it came to selecting for our architectural engineering services, we selected the project architect, who's kind of our project manager role, then the design architect who is stamping the plans, really focusing more on leading the design team, the lead MEP engineer, as well as the lead civil engineer. So we saw these individuals as the ones who would interact with us the most and have the biggest impact on the project. So we selected 4 for that. And then when it came to the construction manager at risk interviews, we selected the pre-construction lead, so that project manager during the design phase that's helping with a lot of cost estimates and constructability reviews. And then the construction project manager, so typically different skill set. They're the one leading everything with us, tracking change orders and risks and things like that during construction. And then the site superintendent. So on our architectural and engineering services, we had 4 responses, and we shortlisted 2 of those teams to interviews. And you can kind of see here kind of the scoring and the weight that we utilized. So again, on the the written proposals, no one piece of it throughout could be more than that 35%. So here we had fee at 10%, even though that was, we were kind of recommending not to have fee be part of a score. And I'll share later how we have kind of changed this a little bit as we go. But at the very beginning of using this, they wanted to utilize fee instead of being 100% qualifications-based selection for the team. So we reluctantly agreed to 10% for fee. And then those 3 components within the written proposal were 40%. They provided a portfolio of experience that once we scored the blind anonymous piece we saw, and we scored at 10% of it, we had past performance surveys. So here we saw how past clients of theirs would score their performance, and then interviews were 35%. So up to the end here, we really saw them as consultant A, B, C, and D when it came to the scores. Now, of course, we knew who the teams were we were interviewing once we became face-to-face with them. But putting all the information together, it was not all shared until the very end when we had those final scores. So the success of that, the headlines started to change. So we did get a great team on for design. And one of the first articles that came out as we were going through design is the city's revealing, a green public friendly design for $18.5 million, for this project. So the narrative started to become more positive because we did pick a team with expertise that understood the challenges we had in our community. And they went about it with community meetings and everything else to really focus in and address those issues. So here's some more positives we heard in public comments. Thank you for making effort to do the right things. It's a really nice design. And it's green, environmentally sustainable also. Very happy for our police force, much needed. So we really liked how that public narrative changed. And then this overlapped some of that design, of course, because we brought in the CMAR team at about 30% design. But to go into the specifics of this, when we put out, again, this was the first RFP we had ever put out for CMAR services for the city. We had 10 responses. So 10 teams were interested. Really, they came from a lot further out than what we were used to, and we received a lot of good responses. So from those, it was kind of tough, but we narrowed it down to 5 teams to interview. There was kind of a natural break, so we did that. And here the weight, you can see some similar, 25% for interview, 5% for survey, 35% for written proposal. Unfortunately, we were really pushed to maximize the weight that we were assigning to fees. Because again, this was the first time we had used the construction manager at risk. So they wanted to weigh that very strongly. And so that's kind of how it played out. You can also see that made the difference between our selection of contractor B or contractor C. It really came down to the cost in the end. If that would have only been weighted at 10%, we would have ended up utilizing contractor C. So it did make a big difference, but As you can see, the other scores were also right in line, 8s and 9s on average out of 10. So both were great teams. So some highlights on this project, we were stuck with some reduced square footage, but we really were able to maximize the programming within that space. We were able to add administration and investigations. We were kind of shelling that space initially, but the PD operating budget, they were able to save $1 million over the course of 2019. And they said, instead of it being a shelled space, construction's already started, but can we put $1 million in to finishing out this space and moving over our administration group and all of our investigations, and that way we'll all be in the same facility. So we did that 3 months after the GMP contract, with a GMP amendment, and it worked out great to have that flexibility. We had gone and gotten those that pricing at the time of the first GMP, though. They were kind of alternates. So they also locked in that pricing for us while we could scramble and figure out how to come up with $1 million, which they were able to do. And I had said, they weren't getting any more than 18.5. Well, nothing more than what was already previously authorized for budget. So, they cut in other areas of operations for the year in order to be able to apply it, but there was no going out for more debt authorization. That was not an option on the project. So this project came in, we still consider, under budget. We were tasked with spending all but $1 of the debt. So we fell a little short. We spent all but $10,000 because I like to have a little bit of contingency, but really out of, the $18.5 million of debt, having $10,000 at the end that we didn't put into permanent debt. These were temp notes until the end, really was a win that was touted throughout, that we maximized for the police department, but also didn't go over, which was the goal. We also stressed on this project a sustainability workshop. So that was huge in the community's eyes. You saw in some of the comments, having a lead checklist and putting future solar, readiness in there, and future electric vehicle readiness for the project, because we weren't quite there with all our other plans, but we wanted to make sure we wouldn't tear up any infrastructure in the future. So that project, started design in 2018, was wrapping up the end of 2020. I will say we're all aware of events that happened in 2020, and this project was successful, I feel, because of the approach we had and the teams we had, that we were able to get through COVID with very minimal impacts, even though that was the second half of our construction period. And we were able to adapt and absorb, any costs or schedule impacts from that and still complete the project on time. So the next project that we started into design on, and right after that, was our Kansas River wastewater treatment plant. So this plant was built in the late, I think it was 1950s. We did a major renovation in 1980 and in 2000, but we were going to have to come in, since this handled a majority of the wastewater for our facility. We needed to propose alternative delivery, because we were going to have to continue to operate this plant and send 10 million gallons per day of wastewater through this site, as well as handle 80 million gallons of peak flow in rain events. So for these challenges we have with this site, we proposed the construction manager at risk delivery method. And since we had such success with XPD, we wanted to use that selection process. And we emphasized to our commission utilizing our new strategic plan language that was adopted around that same time, that, this is an efficient and effective process to use this delivery method. It's utilizing, sound fiscal stewardship with this approach, and that we can incorporate a lot of sustainability into our project, also utilizing alternative delivery. So procuring the engineer and the CMAR teams for this project. On engineering services, we did successfully push to do qualifications-based selections. So fee was not a factor in the scoring. The blind components of the proposal added up to 45%, those 3 components we talked about earlier. And then we had 25% was based on past project experience, 30% for the interviews, We interviewed a project manager, a process engineer, their engineering manager, which was more for the internal team, and then, who was looking at the condition assessment, like QA, QC type pieces of that. And then for the CMAR services, we got the CMAR on board after the basis of design report was sent to Kansas Department of Health and Environment. So prior to our schematic design phase, for CMAR, we were able to reduce that fee component of the scoring to 15%, which we felt was much more reasonable and in line with kind of the research and what we had seen was more best practice to try to get it in that 15% range. So we did that. 45% was the blind proposal, 5% experience, and 35% interviews. And again, we focused on the pre-construction lead, the project manager during construction, a constructability expert, and then they were able to choose for that fourth role who they wanted to highlight from their team for the interviews. But all of these interviews were done in the same way, where it was the one team member with our panel of for evaluation. So then the project we have underway right now, our Municipal Services and Operations Campus. So this will bring together, all of those groups within Public Works and Utilities that are currently spread out, except for those that have to stay at our treatment plants, of course. But our field services, our tech group, our administration group, engineering, we've all been crammed into small spaces, that weren't really designed for the number of staff we have and for the work that we do. So excited about this project. Started the first phase of the design development for the first phase of the project started last year. And this project has grown a little bit in scope. After communications with our governing body, they did decide to go all in and do not just phase one of our project, which was in that $50 million range. They're going to do both phases, which is also bringing over our maintenance garage and our solid waste team in a separate building on the site. So this total project's now $130 million and will be complete by the end of 2027. So a little bit, about the project. It's all these work groups you see listed here. It's our fuel islands. It's the project includes a lot of site work because it's on a remediation site, actually. So we were going to capture a lot of different benefits all at one time. So we utilized this procurement approach for multiple components on this property. First, we had an environmental remediation study that was qualifications-based selection. You can see the distribution similar to how we did the scoring percentages. Then we had a master plan and design services component proposal for that. And again, we were able to do 0% on the fee. So they had to submit the fee, but it was pass-fail. It wasn't scored. And you can see the scoring breakdown there. And then the construction manager at risk, again, we brought them in around the time of schematic design. It was wrapping up. And you can see the breakdown that we utilized for them with the 15% fee. So some lessons learned and some overall impact. So some of the lessons we've learned, over the last, I guess it's been 6.5 years now. Our RFPs that are focused on the expertise of our team and risk and value and differentiation are much more efficient and effective. As you could see, just having the smaller, less pages of a proposal also helped a lot. And we were really reading every word of a proposal as opposed to, I think at times, when you get an inch thick proposal, people kind of skim through it. So we were really focused on what was important. And that has led to a lot of success there. Also, alternative delivery results in these successful projects due to that early involvement and communication of the whole team, design and construction team. And that changing our policy and our procedures did have a big impact. So one of the things that happened during this time is they developed within our finance group a division focused on purchasing and procurement. And we had started, so every department was managing their own stuff kind of separately. Our group was managing all the design and construction procurement, but we were not procurement experts. So it was great when a purchasing manager was hired and we shared the knowledge from these projects, these first couple projects, and what that policy was that was developed, and working together with the purchasing division. They developed a more standardized, RFX checklist, and these forms were written into our new bidding software so that anytime we're going out for proposals, we're using forms where they focus again on the risks, on the differentiators, on the project execution and approach. So it's become more standard and more familiar with it, both inside the city. All city employees are starting to recognize these as they join evaluation teams, but also in the community with architects and engineers and contractors. They're familiar with this approach. We've had really good feedback. So in summary, sometimes public entities have old rules that can limit our use of best practices. Change may be difficult, but it's doable, it's worth it. Seeing our changes being implemented on those first few projects is really rewarding. Again, my favorite part, and we like to share the wins as much as we can. And making a positive change in one area eventually will impact other areas as well. So how we were able to then spread this to impact all of our projects.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.